Good morning. So, very serious situation that we had developed starting at 11:15 last night. 11:15 last night at the intersection or at close proximity of Grand River and Warren, a lone female was fatally shot. Our units responded out and began an investigation of this homicide. And what we determined is that there was a dispute between the female and a male subject who was over a child custody issue. It was at that point that once we determined or had a pretty good idea who was involved in this homicide, at approximately 5:15, this suspect approached the 5th precinct. And so we didn't know, and we still don't fully know the connection between the 5th precinct and this suspect. He drives up in a large black SUV station. He gets out with a high-powered weapon, leans over the hood, and begins to fire several shots into the police station, totaling about 4. As this was happening, a lieutenant who was seated at the desk went around the back to try to get a visual to determine what was happening. He put out a help call. Several units began to respond in, and as they did so, this suspect by this time had left in front of the police station and then engaged an additional responding police car. That police car was fired upon at least one time, striking the windshield of that car. The officer was not injured. The suspect continued to move from that location approximately a half a block, where he parked in a parking lot of a closed business, and he just sat there. It was at that time, once the officers arrived, they could see that he was still inside of the vehicle. They knew that he was armed and dangerous, and so they declared a barricaded suspect, and our special response team responded out. So again, this started at about 5:15, and they made several failed attempts to make contact with this suspect. As this was going on, we also determined that following the shooting incident involving the lone female, his child's mother, a text message was sent to the family. And I saw the text message, and basically it said that I told you I was going to kill this victim if my child was taken. And then he references the police, he references a judge. He doesn't say what police, what judge, but it's in the text message. So as we do the investigation, it appears now that maybe that was his reason for coming to the 5th precinct following the shooting incident. And so once the special response team got here, they developed a plan. They knew they were dealing with an armed and dangerous suspect who had already fired on the police station, fired on the police officers, took the life of a female victim. So they came up with a plan. They took their armored vehicles, moved in very close to prevent him from moving from this location. As they were moving in to block him in, they could see that he was holding an AR-15 against his chest. And as the officer said, "Let me see your hands," he shook his head negative. And there was an exchange of gunfire between this subject and several of the SRT officers. Let me just say, the special response team of the Detroit Police Department is one of the finest. Over the last week, they've been on several high-risk situations. This one was no exception. If this suspect had left this location, there could have been additional carnage. Bad situation all around. So at this point, I'll take any questions you might have. And again, I'll put this out. This is what we know now. The facts may change as we go deeper into the investigation. But this suspect was fatally shot during the exchange of gunfire between SRT and himself.
Can you tell us anything about the suspect's residence and age?
28-year-old. The victim of the earlier homicide, she's 28 years old. At this point, I won't be giving out any names. They immediately after the suspect was shot, they began immediately trying to go into a rescue situation unsuccessfully, and he succumbed to his injuries. No officer was shot in the exchange of gunfire.
Any injuries to the officer where the squad car was hit?
It was a fragment of glass where the round hit the windshield. fragment of glass. He got a very small cut. That was the extent of his injury.
Can you walk us through the mindset of SRT when you've got a suspect that is in a highly volatile situation, already willing to fire on officers?
You know, it's a high-risk situation. I would tell you, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think this is our 31st now, and I keep track. This is our 31st high-risk incident involving a barricaded suspect year-to-date, which is significantly higher. Every time they're called out, it's generally with an armed and dangerous suspect. Clearly, this one was no different. This was a very high-risk situation for a couple of reasons. He had already, we believe, was the one responsible for taking the life of his estranged girlfriend or his child's mother. We got hold of text messages that suggest that he took her life and that he was maybe going to take the life of a police officer. He then comes to a police station, gets out very boldly, parks right up in the front of the door, gets out over the hood with this long rifle and begins to fire several times at the police station. So they knew going in that this was a very dangerous suspect. As I was monitoring this situation, there was a lot of discipline, a lot of conversations about the fact that he was dangerous. The officers should maintain cover and concealment. And so this was certainly a situation that needed to be addressed by our special response team. And so they just do a phenomenal job, and they're here with me today. If you, Captain, if you could introduce yourself.
Captain Robert Mitchell.
Commander Darren Zalaji.
And certainly
Commander Decker of Major Crimes.
Chief, did any rounds actually enter the precinct?
I am not certain. Does anyone have that information? It did enter. This is the commanding officer of the 5th Precinct. And where actually did they enter? Through a glass?
Through the glass.
Did it penetrate the glass?
Apparently. No.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it went through the interior bulletproof glass and was stopped by the second set of bulletproof glass. Thankfully.
So again, a high-risk
Can you repeat that
situation
for us,
that,
Chief?
I'm sorry?
We couldn't hear his response. Can you repeat that? Or maybe just step up to the microphone
Yeah.
and tell us.
There's a vestibule in the 5th Precinct. There's 2 sets of bulletproof glass. It looks like the rounds penetrated the first set, and then we're stopped by the second set of bulletproof glass, thankfully.
Can you just tell us your name and how to spell it, please? Before we
Eric
begin?
Decker, E-R-I-C-D-E-C-K-E-R. I'm Commander of Major Crimes, Detroit Police. Thank you, sir.
Again, when I talk about the 31st high-risk situation, we've seen a continuing trend of this, where armed and dangerous suspects who are very aggressive. This situation was no different. Again, not only did he fire into the police station, he fired at oncoming officers that were responding to the lieutenant's call for help after the shots were initially fired. So it was a high-risk situation. And again, had they not acted in a way to prevent that vehicle from moving, if he had gotten away, as I indicated, there could have been additional carnage. Very dangerous.
Is there any concern? Obviously, the Fiat Chrysler plant is close by. There was shift change. How did that play into the whole situation and all those people?
They were rerouted to go in through another entrance. Initially, when this car came out, we didn't know if he was actually on Chrysler property, but we determined that he was actually on a closed business across the street from the plant. But of course, in a situation like this, we need to secure the area, and no vehicles or pedestrians could, get through.
Chief, did you ever have any contact with this guy before?
I'm not aware of it. I know that during this ordeal, they made several efforts to reach him by his cell phone. He never answered. Oh, the other thing I want to make a clear point, and I think it's important to say, that several times when he was parked at the location in that parking lot, he would turn his turn signal on, hit his brakes, and we know that's a way to try to lure in the officers. We believed if our patrol officers had approached him, he would have engaged them. And that's exactly what happened when the special response team responded. Unfortunately, they came in with their armored vehicles. And until our critics who always complain about why would you need an armored vehicle, this is a clear example of that. It's about saving lives. And there is no way that a police car could go in close in that kind of situation and withstand the weaponry that this individual had. He had high-powered AR-15 .223 rounds, which would have clearly penetrated a standard vehicle.
Did the suspect ever get out of the vehicle in the end there, or did he stay seated in the vehicle when he was firing at the officers?
Well, what I know in the investigation right now, as they approached to block him in with the armored vehicle, the AR-15 was pressed against his chest, and so he was ready. And so as they pinned him in, that's when the exchange of gunfire took place.
Is he a Detroit resident?
I'm not certain. I know he does have, I will say this, he does have a history of domestic violence. There's a pending warrant out of Southfield, but he does have a history of domestic violence.
He's 28 years old.
28 years old, and the female victim's 28 years old.
Where's the child at?
I don't have that information.
Do you know how old the child is?
I don't have that information. Good?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thank you.